Hello gang, Tattooed Biker here with you. Welcome back to the channel that explores the bizarre world of cryptids, unidentified creatures, and the unexplained. From mysterious sightings in the woods to encounters along the roadway in the dead of night, these true stories will leave you questioning what you thought was real and safe in our world. Now, ready to hear some intriguing reports that will have you looking over your shoulder? If so, grab your gear and let's ride.
Number 1. Dear Tattooed, something weird happened to me in high school, back around 1990 in West Texas near Fort Stockton. There aren't many trees where I'm at except this 2-acre patch of thick trees right off the main drag. I was with 5 of my other friends at the time, and we were curious about what was in the middle of that area. That, and we were looking for a place to drink where we didn't have to drive out of town and party with the coyotes and the rattlesnakes. Anyhow, we pulled into a residential street behind the wooded area and all walked in. It was nighttime, not super late or anything, but still late enough to be kind of creepy though. We all walked in a single file, with me at the front. We were all talking as we walked and trying not to act scared. Typical teenager stuff. We get far enough in that you can't see the car lights nearby through the trees or anything. We stopped for a moment because my girlfriend at the time started to get really scared and didn't want to go any further. When she did this, the other 2 girls that were with us got freaked out too and didn't want to move ahead. I, however, trying to act macho at the time, said, "I'm not scared," and pushed on a few yards ahead. Very soon, I could no longer see or hear my friends, who should have still been very close. I look over to my left and notice a very small clearing, maybe 10 to 15 feet away. I noticed something. It was white and low to the ground. Have you ever seen something and it's like your brain just can't catch up to what you're seeing, so it doesn't really register? As I'm trying to focus on what it is, after a very brief moment, I realize it's a white goat. This might sound weird, but I'd never seen a goat in real life before, so this was unusual to me, not to mention that there were no fences, really, or anything to keep it where it was, so it was highly strange, I thought. I don't know how much time elapsed for this whole experience, but in hindsight, it feels like only a few seconds. But about as long as it took my brain to process that I was looking at a goat, I was suddenly overcome with fear. This thing turned to look up at me, got up on 2 legs, and came running directly at me. I have never been so overcome with terror in my life. That thing maybe took about 8 or 9 steps, and I turned to run back the way I came. I wasn't so macho anymore. I was screaming to run because a 2-legged goat was chasing me. We all hauled ass out of there and never went back. I was so freaked out that I told my parents about it. My dad laughed and said the property owner probably just messes with kids that sneak in there. Maybe that's the case, I don't know, but I told my dad that whatever it was ran directly at me. I mean, it wasn't dodging trees or anything. Just stood up to be maybe 6 or 7 feet tall and came full charge at me, on 2 legs like a human, but with these weird little goat legs. It's kind of funny thinking about it again, actually. I still don't know exactly what I saw, but it really appeared to be a 2-legged goat sprinting at me, upright through the trees. I never heard anything. Like anything at all, no footsteps, no nothing. Which is also kind of weird in hindsight. Anyhow, there's my weird 2-legged goat story from West Texas. Signed, Marty. Number 2. Dear Biker, my great-grandmother, who passed away in 2010, came from a family of Swiss immigrants who arrived in the U.S. back in 1918. They owned a great deal of land near Montpelier, Idaho. and that's where they worked the dairy farm. This area is very rural, and back then I imagine it was even less populated than it is now. So the story might seem all the more creepy through that lens. I'd actually heard this secondhand from my grandpa. I don't know why my great-grandma never told me this herself, because I would have loved to have asked her for more details. Based on her age, this would have had to have happened back in the 1930s when she was around 12 years old. She and her sisters were in the buckboard wagon with their dad when he had to stop for a minute and run in to grab something from one of the farm buildings. They're out in the middle of nowhere, basically, with nothing but fields for miles. Not a single other person in sight. While my great-grandma and her sisters were waiting back in the wagon, some kind of huge, hairy creature suddenly appeared out of nowhere and stared at them. According to my grandpa, my great-grandma said this creature had a very human-like face, but it clearly wasn't human. It was all black in color and covered in very mangy hair. There was also something really off about its eyes, and in fact it wore a long, flowing white robe that was really out of place for that period and location. She described its expression as curious and a bit confused, but not exactly malicious, though it obviously scared the crap out of all of them. The girls all screamed and cried until their father heard them and came running back to the wagon, but by the time he got there, the thing had wandered off and out of sight. The horse pulling the wagon was also very skittish for several days afterwards. They never saw it again. My great-grandma was extremely sweet, kind, but a no-nonsense kind of lady. She wasn't really the superstitious type, and she would always chuckle at my over-the-top obsession with Harry Potter, so I don't think she was the type to make this story up. According to my grandpa, she attested to its truthfulness until her dying days, never once taking it back or denying it as some sort of childhood prank on their father. Do you have any idea what she and her sisters might have seen? My initial thought was a Bigfoot, but the white robe thing kind of threw me off. I've never heard a Bigfoot account where the creature was wearing white clothes, or any clothes. So I'd love to hear some input from your community if you read my story. Thank you. Signed, Sabrina. Number 3. Hey TB, I live in the Navajo Nation, New Mexico. It was about 2 a.m. and I was driving home with a close friend of mine. There was very little traffic on the highway. Up ahead on the side of the road, I see what looks like a man sitting there on the guardrail. I suddenly got this horrible feeling in my gut. I just had this feeling that this guy was going to do something really awful. This feeling came out of nowhere, and I honestly felt as though he might jump in front of our truck to commit suicide or something. As we got closer, he stands up, and I moved over into the next lane. As we get closer, he starts walking into the road, and internally, I start panicking. There was no time to slow down, and I couldn't swerve to avoid him for fear of rolling the truck. That's when my friend and I instantly started screaming. Just as we were about to hit what I thought was a man, he jumps and has wings and jumps over the entire truck. It was only visible for a second, but I can still remember it, clear as day. This thing had the body of a man from head to waist, but from its waist down it was hairy. The wings were also dark and leathery looking. The feet were the worst. Instead of human feet, they were these horrible talons, I guess, like those of a chicken, but also dark and hairy. The best comparison I can make is that it looked like a human-sized gargoyle. It was easily the most horrifying thing that I've ever seen in my life. If my friend hadn't seen it as well, I would think that I'd gone crazy. On a side note, in the years since that night, I've met one other person who's seen the same, if not an extremely similar creature. I just kinda wanted to know if there's anyone else out there that has. Thanks for reading. Signed, Oscar. Number 4. Hi, Tattooed. In recent years, there's been multiple sightings in my small town of Merrill, Michigan of something that doesn't match a single cryptid that I've ever read or heard about. I personally haven't seen it, but I have talked to 3 witnesses that I would trust with my life, and I really want to know about this thing. The first witness is my uncle, and he's the main reason that I'm on this hunt. You see, when he was young, he used to take night walks in the neighbor's woods, right before sunrise, as long as it was dark enough and no neighbors could see him. He would take a very dim flashlight with him on purpose, and if he thought that anyone saw him or was maybe following him, he'd put his hand over it and hide in the darkness of the trees. He claims the main things that scared him were the raccoons and the possums, but he had never had any problems with people on his walks. But he still knew the risk of trespassing. Though his story isn't very exciting, he got the best view of the creature out of all 3 witnesses, claiming it stood only a few feet tall and had legs bent backwards, with large, bulbous, insect-like eyes, and the rest of it looked like a kangaroo and a monkey hybrid. Many cryptids are kind of close in visual, but none of them have thick hair and big eyes like this one had. I showed him drawings of other look-alike cryptids, and he dismissed every single one of them. He claimed that he was just walking out of the woods as it was getting brighter, that the sky was gray and the woods were still dark from the trees, but the road was almost visible, down the whole mile. On his way across the road and back to the house, he saw that thing a little ways down the road. It's said to have crossed the road in just 2 steps, despite being short and disappearing into the woods my uncle had just exited. The second witness is unfortunately deceased now. He was a natural conspiracist, so it came as no surprise when I heard his story a couple of years ago. His description was much less valuable, and I have the belief that this was the same cryptid. A few miles away from the first incident, this man said he had seen a small, ape-like figure jump almost to the tops of the trees. This is the least resourceful sighting because I can't ask this man to answer anything he left out or to give any more info. This is all I have for his sighting. And the third is my grandma's good friend Sylvia, from a state away. You see, every 4th of July, they park a camper in my grandma's yard and stay for a week or 2 to visit all the friends and family they left behind when they moved out of state. Now keep in mind, these folk have never heard the stories of this creature, and for this story, well, I was in the house as it happened. Sylvia's husband had a few beers with my grandparents. There's a big tree on the side of a barely used road, and he walks over there to relieve himself. As he was by this tree, he noticed the same big bug eyes that my uncle had seen. It was staring down at him from the tree line across the road, and as soon as he focused on it, the cryptid backed up into the brush and was suddenly gone. Me and my uncle freaked out about this, as anyone would. As crazy as the whole thing sounds, me and my whole family believe and know this creature. We've even narrowed down where it could possibly call home, based on how far sightings go. Do you have any ideas? Signed, Frederick. Number 5. Dear Biker, I saw this something several times as a child. You see, my parents rented an apartment in Coatesville, Pennsylvania. We lived up on the 3rd floor, and there was a fire escape around our building. In my parents' room, my mom would lean out the window to blow her cigarette smoke out, and I, being a very small kid, would always look at the going-on in the city below. probably waiting for my dad to come home from work. Well, one night I was alone in the room and looked out the window, where we could have stepped out onto the fire escape, and there was this thing. It was to my right, but also about 20 feet or so from me. It was huge, tall and broad-chested. Its back was facing me, and I looked in complete confusion, just trying to understand what it was that I was looking at. It suddenly turned to face me. It had strange and sparkling red eyes, and its face was like that of a horse, but shorter, and the chest was human-like, but really buff and muscular. Its legs and rear end were horse-like also. Massive, strong legs with hooves. Its arms were human-like. In contrast to its large body, its tail was slender and pointed up. It also had horns. When he stared deep into what I felt was my soul, it snorted, like a horse does when the horse exhales fast through its nostrils, and you could see the steam and anger coming out of it. Instantly, it flew or ran towards me, not with wings because he didn't have any, but I don't want to think it ran using its legs to run towards me. It was more like a projection, like it used its mind to just take off like a dart in midair. After that first encounter, I had seen it another 2 times. It became like a conversation just between us. I'd get this feeling it was there and then take a peek out the window just to see if I could verify what it was. And sure enough, it would be there, back facing me. Then it would give me its signature snort, which began to feel like my warning. When it turned to face me, it was like telepathically telling me that I wasn't supposed to see it. It would then come at me until I quickly jerked my head back inside the window. It never passed the window or tried to come in. It just didn't like me spying on it, I guess. And after the 3rd sighting, whenever I felt its presence, I stopped looking. Because I felt like it knew that I knew that it was there, and I knew that it wanted me to stay inside that window. Thinking about it now as an adult, I wonder if it was protecting me from a fall maybe, or some other horrible event that could have happened. Thanks for reading. Signed, Anonymous. And there it is. All I have for you tonight on unknown creatures and strange cryptids. Remember, the world is a mysterious place, full of secrets and unexplained phenomena. If you have a story that you'd like to share or have encountered something strange yourself, just send it to the email address in the description of this video, and your story may just appear in a future episode. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll be seeing you on down the road a ways. Biker, out.